Hi, everyone. This is Evan Polaski, Investment Relations Manager with Ashcroft Capital, and today I have Traci Wilhelm, Ashcroft's Director of Asset Management with me. We're going to be talking through Retreat at Archway, the first asset in the Ashcroft Value-Add Fund II. Before we jump into that asset, Traci, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what a typical day of an asset manager looks like?
Thanks, Evan. I started my career actually as an attorney and did commercial real estate transaction law. Hated every second of it. So I quickly pivoted and ended up in the asset management field at a company called Gables Residential, who is a fairly large management company throughout the country. And I was really lucky to start in asset management with an owner-operator structured much like the Ashcroft-Birchstone relationship, because it gave me a very different perspective than what a lot of lender asset managers go through. And so I was really lucky to start there. From there, went on to work for merchant builder JPI, and then took over all of the separate accounts asset management for CBRE Global Investors, where I had a portfolio across the country and managed the multifamily assets for several large international and national clients. So following that, I started the residential business for RXR Realty here in New York, who's the fifth largest landlord in New York City, which was really a wonderful experience, and was excited to join Ashcroft last July and really see the growth that we've seen even since I joined. So it's been really exciting since I've been here. And as for the day in the life, what I love about this job is that there is no typical day. So we're doing everything from walking properties with the acquisitions team to make sure that our business plans are appropriate, to walk to weekly calls with the property management teams to ensure that all of the operations are running smoothly, occupancies are staying high, capital projects are moving forward, and dealing with anything that may be unexpected that comes up at the properties, and being a little bit strategic about how we're navigating through any challenges that we see as an industry or in a submarket in particular.
Okay. Yeah, and we'll definitely dive into some of those roles a little bit further, and particularly as they pertain to Archway. Before we jump into those questions, though, and diving into Archway, I want to recap what Archway is. So Retreat at Archway is the first asset in the Ashcroft Value-Add Fund II. It's located in the Norcross neighborhood of Atlanta, which is in the northeast suburbs, right along that I-85 corridor, and a main thoroughfare into downtown Atlanta, as well as a really thriving industrial and employment driver area in and of itself. The asset was built in 1986 and contains 284 units, of which about 3/4 are still in their original vintage condition, leaving a strong value add play for the Ashcroft Value-Add Fund II to capitalize on. We purchased this asset 100% off market from a seller that Ashcroft has acquired 2 prior Ashcroft acquisitions from, both of which have gone full cycle and performed very well. Let's jump into a couple of these questions. So Traci, in your opinion, what are kind of the top 3 items that make Archway a great asset?
Well, I think first of all, I would say that when you're on the property, there's a tremendous community feel already. And that's something that's really hard to create, and it exists already, which means people are going to be more willing to stay, more willing to transfer into renovated units, and more willing to pay more for the existing product that's already on the property. I would say that if you've seen images of the property, we have a tremendous opportunity for immediate physical improvement. It's a very unattractive color, to say the least, now, and that's something that's so easy to change and can make just a dramatic difference in terms of marketing and in terms of your rent values. I think the third really interesting thing about this property too is really what comes from the seller that we've bought from before. Is we know the opportunities that exist in terms of operational upside. And so, creating resident connections for people is really important, because that creates longevity on the property, but also just kind of management 101 and making sure that everybody's maintenance work orders are being taken care of, and that payments are easy, and that everybody feels that living on the site is simple and safe and fun for people. And I think that it seems basic, but we have bought from these companies before, and we've seen just by implementing these basic steps that we can grow value tremendously and quickly.
Yeah, and I can relate. I own a couple single family rentals, and that maintenance requests, like you said, the overall simplicity and customer service is really a huge factor as tenants are picking where they live, and more importantly, where they choose to continue living upon renewal. So I kind of want to hit the elephant in the room, the macroeconomic effects right now. And with the current unrest in Eastern Europe, obviously record high inflation, or record in the last about 4 decades, and the ensuing interest rate rises, how do you think that's going to affect the value or our ability to execute upon our plan with Archway and maybe even just multifamily in general?
Sure. I think that the good news about multifamily is that everyone always needs a place to live. So there's always going to be demand, no matter what is happening in the world, for a place for people to rest their heads. So that's the great news about our industry. It's the most stable of any of the real estate classes. So that's why I love multifamily. So there is a lot of noise going on right now, and we can't ignore it. We've underwritten for interest rate rises, so that's all included in our underwriting. We negotiate flexible loans so that we can pivot if we need to, depending on how the market may change. So we've taken all of these risks into consideration. I think that the supply chain disruptions have been very challenging as an industry, but I think we've done an exceptional job of circumventing those by getting ahead of it. We order large containers full of kits of parts, so lighting fixtures, plumbing fixtures, cabinet doors, all of that, and we pre-order 2,500, 3,000 units at a time and store them in a warehouse, so that we're less impacted by these supply chain disruptions than others in our space. So we're hearing a lot of other value add players in the space have stopped renovating because they just can't simply get their hands on the product. And meanwhile, we're able to continue renovating and receiving those renovation premiums. So I think that while all of these things are things we should be watching and that we're concerned about, we've really hedged against all of those risks within our underwriting process and the way that we execute once we take over a property.
No, understood. And I've spoke with many people, that investors who have owned businesses, and some of their biggest wins for their companies have been through carrying inventory when other companies have gone to just in time or direct to consumer kind of mentality. And sometimes that works well, but obviously having inventory always hedges when you need the inventory for these unit renovations. Looking more specifically at Archway, what do you see as kind of the biggest risk specific to this asset? And maybe beyond just the underwriting, or maybe that is the answer, how are we mitigating on those risks?
So I think it's the same risk that's always our biggest risk, which is the risk of failing to execute the business plan. So should the supply chain disruptions get to the point where the things that we aren't stockpiling or we can't stockpile, things like appliances, as is a great example, really just halt. Something like that is kind of what we are, I would say, is our biggest risk. And just the fact, if the market changes, if labor changes, if we have staffing challenges, but we've mitigated risks throughout all of that, I think, by a couple ways. This is our second property in Norcross. So we have some economies of scale and some support, some additional staffing support if that's needed. We have we are now going to have a large presence in the Atlanta market. So we've got some supply chain and contractor support in the Atlanta market specifically, much like we do in Dallas. So we've really created that network there. So I think through the supplies that we have and the team that we have on the ground, and we've been hiring people in Atlanta, really strong regional support members, I think that we're really poised to exceed expectations in underwriting. And then again, I think just as we always do, we always underwrite very conservatively. And I can tell you that as an asset manager, that's been a huge win for me because I have been at companies before where the underwriting is completely unachievable. And that's absolutely not the case here. And we're, beating underwriting everywhere. And so that's a great feeling. And, I think that, I think the combination of that conservative underwriting with all of the steps that we've layered on top to make sure that the business plan gets executed correctly and swiftly, I think we'll be fine with that risk.
No, that's good to hear. And I will say conservative underwriting is something that's, I'm guessing our investors hear a lot as they're talking to other sponsors. Obviously, we put that out there because we do believe that. So it is interesting to hear and good to hear that your experiences with other major groups, large groups, that there is a world that isn't conservative underwriting from all perspectives. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Now, as an asset manager, and you had mentioned this earlier in your life, day in the life of, you mentioned touring properties with acquisitions. So how are you involved in that process? And then what steps does that involvement bring to make sure that as we're transitioning this property from another owner and into Ashcroft's portfolio under the Birchstone portfolio, what steps are taken to make sure that's a seamless transition and we can hit the ground running?
So this has been a really great kind of, I think we do it better here than anywhere else I've been, which is great. So acquisitions team will identify the deal, underwrite it, come up with the business plan as they see it, and then they'll bring in the asset management team and we will tour the property with them, walking through the various unit types and decide together, okay, was that original business plan that you first underwrote appropriate for the market, for the actual physical asset as we see it? Do we need to tweak the scope a little bit for the interior unit renovations? Is there a different idea for the amenity spaces? So we walk really through that and fine tune the business plan together so that it's very achievable. And we also loop in operators from the Birchstone team into those conversations to make sure that everybody's on the same page and that everything that we're doing is market appropriate and can be achieved quickly and easily. So I think that's kind of the step one. And then once we close on a deal, the asset management team is really in charge of transitioning that from kind of the acquisitions world into an operating asset. So we work with the Birchstone transitions team to make sure that the property management systems are up and running quickly, that all of the lease files from the previous owner are uploaded correctly, that the rents are coming in, that everything is really set up in a way that can be a seamless operation. Then we also coordinate with the construction management team through that so that we can really quickly get started on the construction. So our goal is to have a unit under renovation within 5 business days of close, at least one test unit so that we can get that process started. We've also been really successful within a week or two of closing, starting to swing hammers on some of the exterior things, roof replacements, for example, exterior paints, for example. We've actually, during the due diligence period, we've actually started the design process with our designers so that, and we've for any properties like Retreat that needs an exterior paint, it needs it desperately. So we front load that with the design team so that we're literally ready to put paintbrushes onto the or the sprayers onto the exterior of the building, because we know that's going to make a really tremendous impact really quickly. So we've really fine-tuned the process so that we can get going with capital projects as quickly as humanly possible, and that we can start realizing that revenue stream and that additional revenue as quickly as possible as well.
Understood. And from the sounds of it, sounds like we're actually doing some maybe low cost, but there is a little bit of capital being spent even prior to acquisition so that we can be prepared day of close. We're ready and off running. Is that correct?
Yeah, we definitely spend a little bit of money on the soft costs of design and we even try to get the seller to give us to sign away to give us permission to enter into permitting for any projects, or at least for monument signs, because sometimes those take a long time to get approved. So we've really tried to front load as much as possible so that we can realize the impacts as possible. And then honestly, from there on an ongoing basis, we're just constantly evaluating the success of the business plan. Do we need to transition anything? Have market conditions changed? How can we optimize, where we are today? Okay, these carports are leasing at a crazy rate, and we're only charging $25. Let's charge $40 and see what happens. So we're constantly evaluating that and constantly evaluating how the asset is performing versus the business plan, so that we can be versatile and agile and make slight shifts on the property operations in order to make sure that we're staying ahead of the business plan.
Understood. That's great to hear. Another common question that I get, kind of changing gears a little bit, with occupancy so high, particularly at Retreat at Archway, where I think we're seeing about 97% occupancy. How is Ashcroft able to perform those unit renovations and therefore get those renovated unit premiums while tenants are still in place at such high occupancy? How is that affecting the business plan, or how is that handled?
So we underwrite accordingly for that, and this happens to us all the time. So we frequently buy properties that are extremely highly occupied. So we renovate what we can initially, where usually the renewals have already gone out for the first couple of months that we own the property. So there's not a whole lot we can do on the first couple of months, but we don't negotiate on any renewals. So because we really want to create that turnover, we want to create people to move out, hopefully into a renovated unit, but we do need to force that vacancy. And so we then our first month of renewals that we send out gets pretty aggressive. And so we aim our renewal target. It's an art and a science a little bit. And so we aim it if we're trying to go for a certain number of renovations, if it's 10 or 20, we're going to send out the appropriate renewal increase that we think is going to get us to that 10 or 20 number. And so it may be an increase that is really even above what the current market rent is. And that's really strategic in order to force the turnout. But what we tend to do with that, so that we can keep that customer service experience going, is that we will send, it's a very nice letter that, shows them beautiful pictures of our new units and say, for less money than what we're offering for your renewal, you can move into this beautiful newly renovated unit. And so then we're keeping that resident because they are good. They're always, we don't renew people who are not in good standing. So we renew people. So you keep that loyal resident and you're getting that renovation premium, and they feel like they've gotten a discount because they're living in a new unit for less than what you offered the renewal at. So it's definitely an art, and every month is a little bit different in that strategy, but it's all geared to hit that target renovation number.
Okay. And yeah, it does sound like, let's say a tenant does accept our renewal. At the end of the day, we're still hitting our projected rents if they take that, and we technically are hitting those projections, if not exceeding them, without spending the money to renovate that unit at that time. With that
100%. And I actually think, it's really interesting sometimes what, in some of these markets, the rents are growing at such an astronomical rate. I mean, really, it's unprecedented what's happening in the multifamily space right now. And I think it's allowed us to have the confidence to push rates way further than anyone could have ever thought. So it's by saying, well, these people, we had 60% retention and we offer 20% renewals. Okay, well, all of our market rents need to come up, and our renovation premiums can go up that much higher. And that's really allowed us to really outperform. And I think it's really helped us test kind of where the true market is.
Yeah, understood. Now, kind of connecting back to some of those uncertainties, what aspects of Archway allow it to be so stable and such a consistent performer, as noted, with occupancies currently in the upper 90s? What do you feel is driving that type of consistency in cash flow?
I think it's a few things. I think first, Atlanta is a really stable market and has been for a long time. I think it's growing at a tremendous pace. And what's happening is, downtown's getting full and really expensive. And so people are moving into these outer rings. And Norcross isn't that far from downtown Atlanta. And it's like, as you mentioned, it's right on that I-85 corridor. It's not the same pricing as you're going to get when you're closer to downtown. So it's a really affordable place that still allows the convenience of commuting to really probably anywhere in the Atlanta area. And I think that's one major factor that is really going to lead to the stability of this asset. I think another is what I had mentioned earlier with this, that sense of community, and you feel it when you're driving onto the property. There's a sports court on this property, and I was there at 4:00, and there were 20 kids playing, football and on the playground, and that type of community, breeds stability because people don't want to leave. Their kids have friendships there. They have friendships there. So I think that really is going to lead to the stability of the asset. And then also, it's a very clean slate. So there's very little deferred maintenance. It's all what I like to say, the pretty stuff. So exterior paints and making the amenities more functional. And the units are, almost all classics, as you mentioned. So it's really a simple, renovation plan that we've executed, many, many times. And so I think that it's just going to be a really easygoing, stable process. And I think that this property has a lot of longevity to it.
No, that's good to hear. And I certainly appreciate your time, Traci, and all the input you've provided that, like I said, gives a different perspective to our investors than talking to myself or the rest of the investor relations team. I want to remind everybody that watch this that we are currently raising Ashcroft Value-Add Fund II, and you can reach out to any of us to learn more about that offering and help you along that journey. Thank you so much.